when you're recognized.
Remember.
The Planning and Zoning Commission to order at 7:05 p.m. with regular members Anna Tamel, Chair James Laporta, Phil West, Keith Bodwell. Christine Gray is seated on behalf of Stephen Sicardi, and we have two other alternates who are not seated, which means they can participate in discussion but not vote, and they are Bruce Bennett and Will Evans. I want to emphasize that this is not a public hearing, in case that makes a difference to any of you. We're going to follow our usual agenda. The first item is zoning applications, and you actually didn't list any, so we will move on to the next agenda item, which is approval of minutes from February 9th, 2021. That was our planning meeting, where we discussed the new home business regulations. So I'm sure you've all read those meetings. Could I have a motion to approve?
Move to approve the minutes as distributed.
Okay, so Phil and James, are there any discussion or amendments?
House Michelle.
Who is that?
House Michelle.
Whoever is speaking needs to mute themselves.
It's Keith Bodwell talking, but I
Okay.
can't hear it either.
Keith, we don't understand you. Do you have a correction?
I didn't say anything. No, it wasn't me.
Okay. In that case, can I have a vote to approve? Raise your hands, please.
Aye.
Okay, thank you, Keith. The motion passes. Next, we have new applications, and I'm going to let Karen go into the details.
The application that we have on the agenda is an 8-24 referral. I got it. I should pop my agenda up. I didn't, unfortunately, I wasn't as good about getting it up as I meant to do.
I'll read it. I'll read it for you. I have it in front of me.
All right.
To consider and act upon an 824 referral from the Board of Selectmen to sell a parcel of land owned by the town of Cornwall, known as Old Firehouse, as defined in volume 39, page 577, to owner of adjacent parcel 406-407 WCCC LLC, AKA William Betts. And I will just explain, since we have so many participants as observers, that an 824 referral is the name of the statute that requires the Planning Commission to have a right to approve or disapprove any municipal improvement. And our duty is to make sure that the Board of Selectmen is not acting on a whim, but that they are in fact pursuing policies and goals that have been set by the town in the Plan of Conservation and Development. So that's all we have to do tonight. We need to make a yes or no vote. If we vote no, the town has a recourse, which is to call for a town meeting where a 2/3 vote by the citizens of the town, the electors of the town, that is people who are eligible to vote in the town, will overturn our ruling. Is there anybody among our members who wants to make a comment about this proposal? I think you've had the emails with the maps and the narrative. Phil is shaking his head. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah,
No, I mean, I'm good. I've gotten all that stuff and I'm good.
I can make a brief presentation that might help everybody understand things a
Certainly.
little bit.
That would be great.
Yeah.
Go right ahead.
Yeah. So this is a little interesting piece of living history. The town does own, and you have a map there. I don't know if Jonathan showed you, but there's a very small piece of property between what's used to be known as the Farnsworth Bookstore and the new bridge that the town put over Smith what's called Smith Place, which goes into the old meat market and up the hill there. So in between the bridge and the bookstore, there's this, I think it's 0.2 acre piece of property, which is a very small triangle. It used to have the old West Cornwall Firehouse on it, which housed one truck. And when the town outgrew that and built the new West Cornwall Firehouse, which is opposite the school in 1975, this building was taken down apparently, because the only thing I remember, well, I do remember it slightly, but the only thing I know of that's there now is the concrete slab right next to the bookstore where the firehouse used to be. The previous owners, the Farnsworths, approached us as they were trying to repurpose the building because that building, the bookstore, although it's a wonderful building, is in some ways emblematic of the problems of West Cornwall, in that it does not have a well, does not have a approved septic disposal system. The state right-of-way cuts through the building, and there's no parking. So other than that, it's a great piece, even though it's a wonderful historic building. It's a site of a previous Union shear shop that burned in the 1920s, and the bookstore, which became a Masonic Hall, was built on the site. We had talked to the previous owners of Farnsworth because they were interested in reusing their property, and when they trying to sell it, obviously a sticking point was the fact there was no really well or septic. The town is working on the septic issue, of course, but it still requires a well. So the new owner, Mr. Betts, approached us about selling it to him. We felt, regardless of who the owner is, it could accommodate some parking. It could make a well happen there. And that is one of the things that is called for in the front pages of the 2020 town plan, is the town is to encourage new businesses in town. And people may know that Mr. Betts has leased out the old youth store for a ski and bicycle shop, and he's certainly interested. Thank you very much, Jonathan, for that map. So this is basically opposite the West Cornwall Post Office. It's a very small piece of property. In my memory, the town hasn't ever used the property. There's plenty of land that goes with the bridge, which is our real interest in that part of town. And if it can help the owner bring back the bookstore into use and make parking or a well system possible, we feel that's something that's worth the consideration of the town, townspeople. It is assessed at $200 by the town appraisal. The monetary consideration is not part of the 824 referral, but that does reflect the limited potential use of the property, except for the abutter. So we felt this is something that should be brought in front of the town, and we do have a town meeting scheduled for April 23rd where this would come up. And as Chairman Tamel said, we have to go to you first for your approval. So it seems like it checks a lot of boxes for us. And why not have somebody use it to help try to bring back our village of West Cornwall?
For the record, I did forward some of the language that Gordon just talked about, including some other references in the page, I think 4, 5, 6, and 7. You should note that if you look in the down, Mr. Betts is in attendance. William Betts, raise your hand, sir. Can you hear us? There we go. And it isn't an LLC name, but that is Mr. Betts who is listening in. So,
Are there any comments or questions from commissioners?
I have a question. Gordon, is the right of way of where the bridge is that 50 feet wide? And if not, would that inhibit development of the area behind the bridge, after the bridge?
Which right of way are you talking about, Bruce? The town right of way or the state right of way?
I'm talking about the right of way on the bridge, which I think is would be a town right of way.
Yeah, you can see there is a dotted line just to the left of the of where it says Town of Cornwall. So we have a separate and distinct lot, which is at least 50 feet wide, where the bridge sits in the middle of. So we have rehabbed that bridge recently. We didn't have to impact this lot. So we do have plenty of room to rehabilitate that bridge. It's currently a single lane. It could accommodate more, but there's only 3 houses on the other side. So I think we're pretty good.
Okay.
Appreciate all that history, Gordon.
There's more, but I'll give you the
Yeah,
skeleton version.
yeah, but we have a long agenda. So
Yes.
I would welcome either a question or a motion to approve from the commissioners.
I have one more question. I'm assuming just from the size of the lot that it's not buildable. Is that correct, Karen? Do you know?
Yes, it's not buildable at all.
Okay. Okay. So
No.
we don't need to worry. I mean,
No,
I was
it's,
just wondering if there.
and plus there's it has a slab, and there has been some questions about what is even under that slab. So it's really to be used possibly for well parking and maybe possibly a septic system if the central system wasn't going in. But no, there's literally no feasible way of using that piece of land. No.
Great. Thank you.
Anything else?
Just to guide you along, your motion would have to address that you have considered and approved and approved the referral and reference the parts of the plan of conservation and development that you feel are the backbone of the consistency with the plan, and you have those comments in that I gave to you to use if you agree with my assessment that that's your finding.
Well, I personally do not have those.
That motion got longer. I can give it a try.
Okay.
I move to approve is it approval of the consideration?
You consider and act in oh, I'm sorry. You consider and approve.
Okay.
Yes.
I move that we prove that we considered and approved to act upon, for the selectmen to act upon the 824 referral from the selectmen to sell the parcel. And as this is in line with our economic development goals as part of the PODC. It include and on page 6 and page 7 to increase the availability of commercially zoned land and to increase opportunities to allow new businesses to locate here.
Second.
Okay, we have a
I
second.
second.
All
I
in
second.
favor? Okay, we
Aye.
have a second from Keith. And everybody in favor, raise their hand or say aye.
Aye.
I do believe we have just passed on that referral back to the town. Next, we have pending applications. This consists of the home business regulations. They're still pending because they've been set for a public hearing for April 13th. So we'll be discussing those in more detail later in the agenda. We don't need to say anything more right now about this, correct, Karen?
That's correct. Because you're going to make your final proofs as part of your workshop meeting and make the motion to move them forward at that point. Yes.
All right. So the next agenda item is correspondence and communication, and I have something to say about that. People who want to communicate with the P&Z are advised that the best approach is to send us an email or a letter to the land use office. It will be shared with all the commissioners. If it arrives before the agenda is posted, it will be included on the agenda as communication received. Such communication from here on in is going to receive a response from me acknowledging the receipt, thanking you for it, and correcting any apparent misinformation that might appear in the communication. but there will be no dialogue, and I'm going to explain why. As I recently discovered attending a 7-hour land use law seminar with our land use consultant and our zoning enforcement officer, there is something called the Fairness Doctrine enshrined in Connecticut case law about land use decisions. All communications about an application that goes to a public hearing must be made before the entire commission at the same time, so that both the public and the commission have all the same information. That's why it's called the Fairness Doctrine. Both written and verbal comments made at a public hearing are considered testimony and are part of the record of that public hearing. Commissioners are barred by statute from having casual discussions about pending applications with individual residents, because we have to arrive at the public hearing with open minds and willing to hear everything. So now, as far as comments that are made during our public commentary period of our regular P&Z meetings, these have to be limited to the posted agenda. And there's a reason for that too. If people express an opinion about, Steve Sicardi has arrived, an opinion about a subject that is not a current application, there's a risk that it will become an application in the future. And if a commissioner engages in dialogue with the public ahead of that, then that commissioner will not be allowed to sit at the public hearing, because he or she will have had a chance to form a prejudgment. Other legal words that are used for this are predetermination or bias. And that is a big no-no. So any comments made by the public at the end of this meeting need to pertain to our agenda, and they will not be quoted in our minutes because they are not considered public testimony. That'll be a different story at our April 13th meeting. So we welcome communications, but they have a certain place, and there will never be a back and forth dialogue, much as some people wish we could do that. Now, have we received any correspondence and communications, Karen?
We received one this morning from Blaine Mathis. It appeared to be testimony for to be put into the record for the public hearing, because it was in reference to the draft regulations that were up on the website.
I read that letter. I will be bringing up some of those when we review the final, because they have some pertinence.
Yes, he had a couple typos that he picked up on. Yes.
Yeah. All right.
As far as other, I checked. I was on email at 6 o'clock. I have not been on since then. So if there's an hour gap, I apologize, but I don't feel that I have to be checking emails during a meeting.
Okay. Do you have anything to say in your zoning officer's report?
Yes, I do. I wanted to just touch upon a few things. Thank you, Anna, for speaking so clearly and succinctly about fundamental fairness, and fairness as I have understood it for many, many years. It is of concern, and it has been of concern in my office, and when I have had to do damage control with people, feeling that meetings have been canceled or meetings are being held without proper protocol. So I am very grateful for your very succinct presentation. I did want to address some other issues. There's been some questions about the posting of agendas and protocol for certain things being put on agenda in a timely fashion. I back 3 boards up. Planning and Zoning Commission. It is not uncommon for me to get zoning permits and sometimes special permits on Thursday morning before a meeting. So when I leave at 12 o'clock, I unfortunately have another job that I cannot stay and spend the afternoon. I come in on Saturday and prepare the agenda, put everything up, and try to get applications put together under the new regulations. They're supposed to be up 24 hours in advance of the meeting. I do my best to do that, and I normally post the agenda on Saturday afternoon, and I am obligated to file my agenda with the town clerk under the statute. That is the proper place where it is officially and must be filed for a legal meeting. Does not have to be on a website that is unofficial website. I have been posting agendas and minutes up on what we call the town website, despite it not being an official website. I do that to the best of my ability, but the question about my posting agendas, a week in advance takes away from citizens and contractors the right to get applications in according to the applications that say you can bring it in up to and including Thursday before the meeting. Wetlands, there's a whole different story. Applications have to be accepted up to the
Don't
day.
need to talk about wetlands, Karen.
But there are statutory requirements for all applications. All three are different, but my normal posting is for all agendas. It's got to be into the town clerk 24 hours prior to the meeting. So that is the reason why the agenda was not posted before Saturday, and it did contain everything that I could get up. So
I appreciate it. I appreciate your explanation. It was an important piece of news for me to consider that the applicant and the rights of the applicant for a zoning permit supersede the rights of the commissioners to receive agendas way ahead of time.
Right.
Because the applicant should not have to wait months and months to get their permit request or their acknowledged or dealt with.
Yeah.
So you won't hear any more complaints from me about receiving the agenda at the last minute.
Okay, and I have two other quick things I wanted to bring up. Being that Mr. Betts was in attendance, I came down the hill last Thursday headed towards Hoosie and came around the corner and saw signs up on the old Utzler's Market. And I am going to be very honest, I was pleasantly surprised to see what appears to be the start of life in the village. I went past, came back, and had the opportunity to speak to the gentleman that is going to be working with Mr. Betts to put a retail store in there. That I am not going to tell anyone at that building to take those signs down. This is a work in progress, and I think it is a welcome sight in a dismal, kind of cold, dreary pandemic type environment to know that there are things happening in the village, including new happenings and movement forward on the Pink House. There will be a liquor license sign going up in the next couple months, and that's a very positive thing. It's taking a lot of work to get all the background information that is needed. I have to speak for the expertise and the help I get from Vera Deneen when Jeff Morgan is called, and we've had to do a lot of background and research in the vault to get information.
Karen, I'm going to interrupt you because even though this is all very interesting, it doesn't really pertain to the agenda.
Okay,
We have a long agenda.
Under my zoning officer, I would make the last piece. I just want to say that, therefore, there is movement in the village. I think it's fair for you to know that my land use office has that information that is moving forward. And the last thing I would like to speak to is that Mr. James Laporta has been a commission member for over 12 years, and his name is being forwarded to the Connecticut Federation of Planning and Zoning Commissions for commendations for service to the town of Cornwall, the Planning and Zoning Commission member.
Put your hands together, guys. James, I don't know how you stood it.
Are you talking to me?
Yeah.
Does that mean I could retire now, right, Karen?
Yes, yeah.
Thanks.
So that's what I wanted to say, just in case. That's pretty much my report.
I do very much appreciate your report. All right, our next agenda item is other business. And we always have this agenda item. There is going to be a change to our meetings. We are going to, under other business, have a short section at every meeting on commissioner training. I think this is especially important because we have 3 new alternates now. And we need to catch them up as quickly as we can about the things that we all have learned over time. And I'm hoping that this will be a tradition that carries forward so that we will always have the best professional representation on our commission that we can achieve. So I have about a 6-minute deal to share with you today. And the first is a history of the Northwest Hills COG, the council, AKA the Council of Governments. Which, putting it together, I have to tell you, I found it fascinating. The state of Connecticut disbanded county government on October 1st, 1960. Because the federal government still required towns to submit federal grant applications through a regional planning organization, the county governments were replaced by something called interregional planning programs. These went through various iterations until in 1971, regional councils of government were enacted. Cornwall held a town meeting in 1972 where the people voted in the affirmative on, quote, an ordinance for participation in the Northwest Connecticut planning region, unquote. By 1978, municipalities seeking grants from state government were now also by statute required to go through the regional planning organization. In 1984, our town held another meeting. By the way, I have these original documents, thanks, courtesy of Gordon, where it voted on an ordinance to participate in the latest reorganization of the Regional Council of Governments. In 2014, during my time on this commission, the State Office of Policy and Management finalized one last reorganization, creating 9 councils of government throughout the state, and thereby joining together 2 former regional planning organizations to form the current Northwest Hills COG. COGs bring together chief elected officials, and I think Gordon told me he's been going to their meetings for about 21 years. All of the municipalities in the region come together to discuss matters of mutual interest and to address shared problems. They are the legal entity for applying for grants on behalf of towns. And I would like to mention the Small Town Economic Assistance Program, otherwise known as STEEP. Those funds allowed us to put in some sidewalks in town and gave funding to many of our businesses for facelifts. We wouldn't have had them without the COG. And I'm sure Gordon could fill our ears with all the different grants that we've had over the years. COGs also encourage towns to work together to share resources and streamline mutual projects by working together. So I'll bring up the example of the Cornwall Goshen shared senior bus and dial-a-ride program. That was also a grant through the COG. If I'm wrong, Gordon, speak up. They also provide us with data, consultation to the towns by educated and experienced land use planners, and help towns meet statutory requirements for such things as plans of conservation and development, and more recently, affordable housing plans. They provide valuable training seminars for members of various state-mandated town commissions. Those mandated town commissions are planning and zoning, zoning boards of appeal, inland wetlands, and conservation commission. I have over the years attended many of their educational sessions, and I can just say that they're outstanding. So that's about COGs. Now I'm going to move on to Cornwall's use of a land use consultant. Our previous land use consultant, Tom McGowan, was with us for decades. Before he began, he was in fact a former executive director of one of those early regional planning organizations. We used him on an as-needed basis to advise us about land use law and to help us particularly frame new amendments to our zoning regulations. Over the years, those amendments were cut and pasted into the document in such a way that most people would agree the regulations were not particularly user-friendly. And I personally, and I'm sure my fellow commissioners will confirm this, for years I've been saying, we need a Cornwall zoning regulations for dummies book. So we did finally decide to do something about that. Under the previous chair, Jill Cutler, a decision was made to ask our new land use planner, Janelle Mullen, to undertake that reorganization. We had a vote on January 24th, 2020, to request that Janelle, who is a new employee of Northwest Hills COG, be allowed to act as our land use consultant through a contract with the town. The Board of Selectmen accepted that recommendation and Janelle came on board. On our March 10th, 2020 meeting, if you go back to the minutes, you will see the following statement. There was general discussion with all commission members, staff, and Janelle Mullen regarding the process to move forward on updating the regulations to not only implement town plan recommendations, but to organize the existing regulations in an easier and more concise manner, to eliminate inconsistencies, clarify legal issues, modernize and add definitions, and modernize and clarify uses in all zones. At a subsequent meeting on May 12th, 2020, the commission members had been polled on what their personal priorities were as far as regulation amendments that had been requested in the Plan of Conservation and Development. As a result of that poll, the Planning and Zoning Commission decided that they would interrupt that reorganization of our old regulations by focusing on updating our home business regulations and asking Janelle to write a new regulation concerning second cuts in relation to donations to the Cornwall Housing Corporation. So I'm hoping that I've educated some of the commissioners, especially the alternates and perhaps the public, because I think there's been a lot of misinformation and we all need to know these things and understand them. Okay. Now we're going to actually move forward to that very workshop meeting to go over one last time the home business regulation that Janelle has so helpfully worked with us for quite some time on. And I'm sorry, I'm doing all the talking today, but that's too bad. I'm the chair, I get to. I have something to say about the home business regulations too. And Gordon will probably chime in. This town has had home business regulations for over 30 years. Our current regulations are pretty outdated. If you actually read them, they refer to something called traditional home enterprises, where they discuss the kinds of things that farm wives in their spare time can create in their arts and craftsy way or in their foodie way to sell for an extra bit of income. Farm wives today all work. If not on the farm, they work off the farm. So our regulations are completely out of date as far as I'm concerned. And we need to revamp them. Now, that most recent Census Bureau information, which came out in 2017 about the state of about what workers in Cornwall do, showed that Cornwall has 3 times more people working from home or calling themselves self-employed than Litchfield County as a whole or the state as a whole. We already work from home. So the COVID pandemic also has made it very clear that the new work from home that many people are now forced into doing is likely going to be permanent in some fashion. I also want to point out that the decline of our commercial districts over the last decade or so, the loss of businesses has made it clear that we need to consider many different types of new economic development, including ones that are not limited to those very small commercial zones that we have. I'll point out that in the 2019 survey, in which we surveyed all residents while preparing our new plan of conservation and development, we did ask a question about about whether or not increasing, this is a quote, increasing opportunities for businesses to establish them here was important to townspeople. And it came in second as one of the top 10 priorities that the town has to engage with in the near future. So our last effort to bring new regulations at a public hearing met with a lot of public comment, most of it negative. We all took that to heart. We took it very seriously. We have worked very hard to answer those criticisms in creating the new version of this regulation. And so we're now going to go over it one last time to catch the typos, to let James make his usual profoundly wise comments. And carry on, Janelle.
Perfect. Before I share my screen, does any commission member want to say anything or add anything? Okay.
Thanks, Anna.
Was that good? All right.
Okay, so this version should be what was up on the town website, updated on February 10th, and I have it in an editable version so I can edit it as we go along should that need arise. So here is page 1. Madam Chair, the best approach, do you want, I mean, we've revisited this so many times. Do you want me to highlight any changes or just give the commissioners a chance?
Well, I think we should just, be quiet for a few minutes and reread them.
Perfect.
When we get to page 2 and 3, I do have some suggestions from one of the people who communicated with us that we can go into.
Okay. So
Let's just ask commissioners for intent and purpose. Is there anything that you would like to amend there? I'll wait for someone to say no before I move on.
I think I'm good with it, Anna.
Anybody
good.
else? Okay, thank you,
Good.
Steve. Good.
Sorry, I'm a slow reader, but I'm good.
Alternates, you got anything to add?
No, I think the purpose of this was to be able to explain, that the town is open for small businesses to be able to develop the economy in the town. I think this does a nice, clear job of doing that. I think it works well.
Thanks, Bruce. All right, then let's go on to the section on definitions. We have divided the home businesses into 3 categories based on their potential impact on the neighborhood. Can you go ahead, Janelle, maybe, and we'll just have you read those?
Sure. The first is home office, the use of a portion of a dwelling, an accessory structure, or a residential lot for business use that does not involve any of the following: non-residential employees, or non-resident employees rather, customers, clients, and or deliveries other than what is normally associated with a residential dwelling.
And this is a no permit home office, correct?
Correct. And the reason why we put it in there and define it is because the regulations are set up in a permissive structure. So anything in zoning regulations that doesn't get defined, that doesn't get mentioned as a potential use, is considered to be not allowed. So that's why we insert this in, considering how many home offices are now a part of just our everyday work life.
I appreciate that clarification. All right, minor home business.
Minor home business, a small scale business which is accessory to residential use and is limited to all of the following: no offsite clients are permitted other than by appointment only. The
You skipped the
frequency.
first bullet there.
Oh, I'm so sorry. No more than one non-resident employee. No offsite clients are permitted other than by appointment only. The frequency of appointments is not to exceed 1 appointment per hour. There shall be no retail sales of any kind. The home business shall not include exterior storage of materials, equipment, or vehicles. No more than 2 parking spots may be associated with minor home business use.
And that requires a zoning permit. Would you speak just briefly about what a zoning permit involves?
Sure. And
Do you have that specified later?
so given that these would be an insertion into the regulations as they exist right now, the current regulations,
Yeah,
zoning permit does not get defined later in this section. It's entails the administrative review of the zoning enforcement officer.
okay. Thank you. And now major home business.
Major home business, a small scale business which is accessory to residential use and has 1 or more of the following characteristics: 2 or more non-resident employees, retail sales of products which are to be mainly produced on site, visits to the premises by off-site customers, clients, or frequent deliveries, pickups. May include the exterior storage of materials, equipment, or vehicles associated with the business use.
And that approval process is a special permit.
Mhm.
Minor typo, you just have a semicolon off after most of the lines, but not under the minor home business under the last sentence there. No more than 2 parking spots may be associated with minor home business use, and there's not a semicolon there. I don't know if we want to be consistent, and that is
Yeah, up here,
yeah,
Yeah,
minor
right.
typo.
I saw that. Do you like it? Do you want it?
We just want it, he just wants it consistent.
Consistent.
Yes, James, I'm all about that. Let's put it in then. If
All right,
that,
great.
yeah.
Make it easy. Thanks.
All right. So under page 2, then, we start talking about,
You know, I'm sorry, on second
Carry on.
thought, because it's at the end, I'd rather have it
Take them
not,
both out.
take
Yeah.
them both out. Yeah,
Otherwise, it seems like we're missing one.
correct. That's my thought, because it's bullets and not numbered. I think it's especially important to just leave it. So. Okay,
or put a period.
Well,
but it's not a sentence. That's where I
Yeah.
well, I
struggle.
question whether you need the semicolons in the beginning, after each one anyway, because they're all bullets that are, there's not a defined order, right?
Very, yep, I mean, that too.
I think it actually looks cleaner without the semicolons.
Great. well then,
I don't know what the grammatic rules are for.
I like this
Here's the
attention to
bullet marks.
detail with, with bullets. It's my understanding that I've seen both. It's really up to the commission. How does everyone feel about how that looks? Oh, I
Much
have
better.
2 over here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think that's better.
And I mean, due to the nature, the whole point of bullets is it's a random list.
Right.
Yeah,
Not an in order list. an ordered
exactly,
list. Right.
exactly. Oh, I missed one.
Yeah.
There we go. Okay,
So point 3A covers the approval process, just showing what kind of permit is required. Point B on the next page,
Excuse me, do you want to say no permit necessary instead of no permit?
yes.
It almost sounds like you can't get a, I mean,
sure.
right?
Yeah, yeah. And because this is a table, I actually can't edit in there now because it was inserted. So let me just, I'm taking notes here. I want everyone to be able to, let me just add text. This will not look the way it will, but just so that everyone can see it on the screen for the purposes, since we're
Yep.
nearing the final, I want everyone to just see what they're getting for the public hearing.
Yep.
So I'll reformat that, but no permit necessary. That sounds good to me. Okay, I'll jump down now to the second page if everyone's ready.
Good.
Okay.
Why don't you tell us about the applications, what they
Yes.
require?
Yeah, so this gets into the application material that's necessary. And it's explained here that both the minor home business and the major home business include a site plan, a floor plan, and a narrative. And when we discuss narrative, it just lays out what one could include in their application if it were to be applicable. I can,
Can you scroll up for just a second?
yeah, sure. You want me to go up?
No, just
Back.
a little bit.
Sure.
So this is point 3 is the approval process.
Yeah.
Okay, just, you can go back down.
Okay.
I'm just trying to understand where the breaks are as far as the bullets and letters, or the dot numbers and dot letters are. But okay. So 3 is, so sorry, go back. Can you go back?
Yeah, sure. So 3 is the approval process for home businesses. So that's where we get into the way in
Right.
which each category can be approved.
Yeah,
And then dot 4, and this is all adapted from the format that the current regulations are in. Dot 4 is the specific provisions for both minor and major. And
Yeah.
then we get into dot 5, which are specific provisions for major home businesses. And this was where, if you remember, we went through different iterations where first they were together, then they were apart, then they
Yep.
were together.
No,
So
okay.
Yeah, so now we have,
So dot 3 applies to everything. Well,
correct,
not home businesses because they don't need a permit, right?
Correct.
So dot 3 applies to everything for
home businesses in the general sense
home
of,
office, sorry, not home office. I mean, the only thing that's weird is,
I think it's okay.
so here's my
'cause
weird part
CA,
here, right?
You've got.
Here's the part that I have a hard time with, is that we have home office in the table, but we don't mention it anywhere else in dot 3, right?
Correct.
correct,
Because it doesn't need a permit.
Correct.
correct,
It almost seems like the table should be, I mean, it's really an information point.
correct.
It's almost like a filler, like a side note between 1 or 2 and 3. Right? Because then we get into the details of minor and major in dot 3.
No,
Well, Phil, I'm sorry.
no, I was just thinking, Phil, would it make you more comfortable if for under definitions, that's because, well, the whole thing is the definitions don't get into approval process.
Yeah,
So if we go back to the definition of home office and we say no permit necessary, then we're touching upon something in the definition with home office that we're not doing within minor home business and major home business. So
I
when,
mean, this table's sort of a definition piece, right? I mean, it's,
No.
or
No,
which
it's-
things need permits?
it's the approval process within
Okay.
the town of Cornwall.
All right. No,
I will
I'm
look-
I'm all right if you guys are. It just seems weird to me that that it touches home office too.
I think it kind of works because dot 3 is the approval process and dot 3A encompasses all three of them, the home office, minor home business and major. And it's just stating that the home office, there's no permit necessary. And then you go to dot B and it says, obviously you do have to go through hoops for the minor and major, and these are listing those hoops. So
Okay. So, I mean, as long as you guys are happy that the only place that it says that home office needs a permit or doesn't need any special permitting is in the table, I'm fine.
That whole section goes from the more general to the more specific, Phil.
Yep.
Yeah.
I just didn't know if, yeah, it's just, you can go on.
It's your weird
Okay,
brain.
If you guys are happy, I'm happy.
it's all right.
Go on, Janelle.
Okay, so then when we get to B, we talk about what is required for the application. So this is where we really get into the user-friendly aspect of the regulations, where we're enumerating, we need a site plan, we need a floor plan, we need you to calculate the total square footage dedicated to your home business, we need a narrative, and if applicable, we need the following: description, whether the site is open to visitors or outside employees, its hour of operation, if they're open hours, if they're by appointment, measures taken to shield exterior storage, materials from public view, and analysis of expected noise, dust, odor, vibration, traffic that may be associated. So it walks the applicant through what's necessary. And then we get into all of the other specifics, which is that if the application for the operation of a home business shall be provided by the property owner. So that specifies that the owner is responsible for ensuring compliance. Even if the business is leased or operated by others, then we get into modifications. If there are changes to the home business over time, that needs to be brought to the attention of the land use office. Modifications often weren't touched upon in the current version of the regulations. So this just specifically touches upon modifications to home businesses. And then we get into the fact that more than one home business can actually be authorized on a property, and it will be considered with the cumulative effects for permitting purposes. And then we get into the specific provisions for the major and the minor. So this is where we combine them back together again. So this is the standard for all minor and major home businesses. So the use is secondary to the primary use of the property, which is residential. The home business is located within the residential dwelling. If it is, it shall not occupy more than 50% of the total floor area. If the home business is located within an accessory structure, the home business shall not occupy more than the total square footage of the accessory structure.
This is where the written comment was questioning whether we should not apply the same principle of 50% to the accessory structure. I remember we went over this back and forth in quite a lot of detail at one of the previous meetings. And we decided that given the varied nature of accessory structures on Cornwall properties, many properties have all these grandfathered in barns and sheds and old chicken coops and you name it. And we cannot necessarily anticipate or I would not want to limit someone from establishing in a business in such an accessory structure if they were limited by the fact that it was already a small structure and we were going to only let them use 50%. Does that make sense? From a
Yes,
point of view of what our
Yeah,
desires are here?
no, I
mean-
agree with you.
I mean, that would be like telling Gordon he can only use half of his stand out in front of his house.
Yeah.
It's
I
Phone's
remember,
different, but yeah,
I remember when we discussed this, I think we used a big barn as our example when we were talking about this.
Right.
Yeah.
But
So
small applies too, right?
if, pardon me?
But a structure that's really small would apply too if we wrote it in there. So,
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
yeah,
And as long as the structure is on the property already and it can adequately contain the business, I don't see that we should have an issue with that.
Yeah,
and to build in another structure, it would have to go through the normal zoning permitting process to fit
Correct.
within the area anyway.
Right.
I think from an external standpoint, we're already kind of taking into consideration any impact on the neighborhood, et cetera, with all the other stipulations that we have. So what happens in their own specific space of a building is really kind of out of the public view. So I don't see why it would be applicable for us to actually limit that at that scale. One other
Excellent.
thing, Janelle, thanks, but you also, I don't know if we want to go back and be consistent with the semicolons and.
Anytime, of course.
In your free
Where
time.
are we? We're over here.
Yeah, I think
Well,
Yeah.
that whole, all the bullets.
Up a little
there.
bit to signage.
Noted for future too. So let's just not use them if we're using bullets. I think it will let me. Hold on. Sorry, I'm still in this.
Yeah.
I never edit in this, but I do when I'm in these meetings with you guys. So,
If you want edit.
We'll take your word for it that you're going to fix it, Janelle.
well, it gets wonky because this is not the program I actually do things in.
Yeah,
This is
that's
just
fine.
PDF.
You're going to have a hard time.
Yeah. So
You have to hit the edit button
I think you have to hit the edit button as opposed to the
on the
add
right
text.
hand
thanks,
column.
guys. Thanks, guys. When you're sharing your screen, it's different. Let's just get these out of there so everyone can see it as it's going to be.
That one stays. That's
I'm
a
leaving
colon.
the colon because these are sub,
Yep,
and then I'm getting rid of these.
yep. There's one above that.
Thanks. Da-da-da. Okay, great.
Oh, you guys are such eagle eyes.
Okay, great. And then we're getting rid of this period. We're leaving this period.
Get rid of it.
Get rid of it. It's not a whole
Great.
sentence.
Thank you. Okay, so where was I?
Parking.
Yes, so here we go. So we're back here. So this is, again, specific provisions for both major and minor. We get into parking. All parking, residential and home business related, must be provided on site. Parking associated with the home business shall be within designated areas that correspond with what is indicated on the site plan. It shall be noted that off-site parking is not permitted. If needed, turnaround areas shall be provided so that exiting vehicles do not need to back into right-of-ways.
Excellent.
And then signage is permitted, provided the identity sign for the home business does not exceed 4 square feet. As noted in the application requirements, the sign's design and locations shall be included with the home business application. Home business signs shall not be illuminated in any way. We get down to E, all refuse generated by the business use shall be covered, screened from public view, and promptly removed from the site. F, all on-site water and sanitary systems shall be adequately sized and in suitable condition to serve the proposed accessory use as approved by the local health district if applicable.
Do you want to get rid of that semicolon? Or is that supposed to be a period?
It's a comma and then a semicolon. If
That should be a period. It's a sentence.
great.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys. Beautiful. And then G, all applicable fire and building code requirements associated with the home business use must be met prior to the issuance of a certificate of zoning compliance. And we'll get rid of that. And this is now a period.
Yeah, and you screwed up your justification.
Yeah, that's fine.
We can fix that later. Just,
I never edited in this. Again, I do everything in design work. So just
Yep.
for everyone's purposes, so you can see what the words will be, all the design configuration I'll do before the public hearing. Shall we go on to page 3?
Sure.
Okay. So there's H that's hanging out. I'll try to edit it so that it's not hanging on its own page if possible. But we have no excessive noise, vibration, smoke, dust, odors, heat, or glare shall be produced by the home business.
Great.
And then we get into, oh,
Period.
With
sorry.
a period after the business.
Thanks. Wonderful. Okay. And then we get into specific provisions for major home businesses. A major home business that includes the exterior storage of vehicles, equipment, or materials shall properly screen the stored materials from the public right of way and adjacent properties. The outside storage of materials associated with a major home business shall not exceed an area greater than 2,000 square feet.
I want to point out, if there are any members of the public still hanging in there with us, that this is a downsizing. The current regulations allow up to 10,000 square feet. It was an issue that was brought up at the last public meeting, and we have all thrown it around a lot. We may need to come back in the future and amend this regulation again. It may turn out that 2,000 square feet is either way too much or way too little. It's hard to say, right?
Mhm.
That's all. Any other comments about that 2,000 square feet? We determined that it would be 100 by 200. No. What am I saying? It would be 200 by 10.
Right. Yeah, we thought it'd be roughly, what, 10 parking spots.
Oh, that was right. That was the beautiful way of visualizing it. 10 car slots. 50 by 40, my vegetable garden.
And then we get into B. If a major home business includes retail, the majority of the goods sold shall be produced on the premises. And C, small engine repair services, kennels, and animal training facilities shall be considered a major home business. The approval criteria, then we get into .6, which is approval criteria. The approval criteria for a special permit application associated with a major home business shall include the following standards. The commissions shall take into consideration the protection of public health, safety, welfare, and property values. The proposed use shall be compatible with the town's plan of conservation and development. The location and magnitude of the proposed use shall clearly be accessory to the residential use. The proposed home business use shall be in harmony with the orderly development of the town and the compatibility with other existing uses. The nature and the extent of the use shall not hinder or discourage the use of neighboring properties, undermine environmental quality, or result in adverse impacts. All applicable standards shall be incorporated into the associated plans. I'll go ahead and get rid of the semicolons. Dun, dun, dun. Okay, and these,
I think we didn't have periods, right? We were getting rid of periods too.
are we for the sentences?
yeah, it should be a period if it's a whole sentence, though.
Yeah.
The other ones didn't even start with a capital, so.
And then we have conditions of approval. So this is a statutory thing as well. Should the commission wish to condition a special permit, the regulations do need to state what the conditions may be. So that's where the condition of approval come into play. The commission may grant the application as presented, deny it, or approve it subject to conditions. Additional conditions or safeguards may be deemed necessary to protect and promote property values, protect the area's environmental resources, improve neighborhood compatibility, and promote best practices for site design. These conditions may include one or more of the following: screening or buffering from adjacent adjoining properties and the public right of way, limitations regarding the hours of operations, requirements for periodic renewal, limitations of size, occupants, or the extent of facilities, regulation of the number, design, and location of access ways, and other site plan features, I'm assuming. Regulation of number, type, and location of signage and parking, requirements for testing and or monitoring, including but not limited to testing of groundwater or surface water, air quality testing, noise level testing, periodic water usage reports and or reports on transportation, storage, use, handling, and disposal of site-related materials. Any data, plans, or drawings, including architect or engineer's drawings, to further support the application.
This is where we had another suggestion, and the suggestion was another bullet that says any other deemed necessary. But I think that's not allowed, is it, Janelle, based on what you said, that we have to specify?
Based on that case law training that we were at on Saturday, they made it very clear that should a commission wish to condition, and the whole point of that is so that the property owner has assurance of their use in some way, and they also have an understanding of the limitations to what the regulations are.
Right. Any other deemed necessary might lend itself to abuse. The property owner must stand on his head on the corner of his property every Saturday morning from 8 to 12. I'm just being exaggerating, but that's why we can't say that. Okay.
And then we get into prohibited home uses, or home businesses rather. A home business is not construed to include restaurants, bars, cafes, or other eating and drinking places. B, it shall be noticed that automotive repair locations are governed by Connecticut General Statutes, Chapter 246, Section 14-54, which states that the local zoning board of appeals, building official, and fire marshal shall approve the location of this use. And then this should actually be C.
Yes, that was the other comment. The most useful one.
Any other use that would create non-compliance with the specific provisions above, other requirements within the town of Cornwall's zoning regulations, and other local, state, and federal laws will also be prohibited.
Good point.
And that concludes our home business section.
We have one more page to go.
It's that.
No, we don't.
We don't? Oh, no, you're right. We don't. Sorry.
No, it's okay.
I got everything out of order. All right, so commissioners, any last thoughts before we go to public hearing?
Yeah, and I'd just like to say, as we research things, I think when the town has had home occupation, home business regulations, and I think actually I was on the Planning and Zoning Commission in 1987 when we first started talking about it. And I don't remember the conversations, but I know those meetings were long. Tom McGowan helped us out. But these regulations, some towns don't allow home businesses. And these regulations, like all of Cornwall's planning and zoning documents, have been evolved over a period of time. But they're all, I'm sitting here in my greenhouse, they're all locally grown by what people reflect on what makes sense for their town. And some of these things like size of an accessory structure, I have a friend who has who's an artist, and he just put up a big space to do his artwork in. And, you know, why not, in my mind. And I have another friend who had a landscaping business out of his grandparents' place, and, you know, why not? You know, I mean, we rely on these people culturally, economically, to keep the town going. And I think over the last 30 years, it's worked out well. And I look at these regulations and they have a hierarchy. And I think one of the goals we had was to make sure people that have moved up here and are working out of their homes feel welcome, feel like they can do that without having to be, under the table or something. Because that's the future, is more home work, which is, I think, very beneficial to families, communities. And so we should encourage this kind of thing. But I'm also struck how similar in total these are to what we had before and how well those have worked out. And having sat through a lot of public hearings in the past, I know the zoning commission has options to listen to what happens. They can amend things, they can take their time, they can go on for a month or two with the hearings. So there is a lot of flexibility, which the town is always, and the zoning commission is just as dedicated now as they were in 1987 to make sure these reflect what really needs to happen in the town. And so, again, we move forward, we adapt, we listen. And anyway, thanks everybody for their time. And one thing, which is a personal aside, one of the reasons I decided to run for the Board of Selectmen was because their meetings were shorter than the Planning and Zoning Commission. But the reason, we went on for 11, I remember looking at the clock, it's 11:30 at night, we were talking about something. And you folks on the commission are just as dedicated and take as much time to make sure these are locally grown regulations as people did 30 years ago. So anyway, thanks.
Thank you. And that segues us to our public comment period.
Wait, Anna, I'm going to ask, it says
Okay, sorry.
in the agenda, I would ask that a motion be made that this is, once corrected, Janelle is going to modify this to number 5, correct? We're on 4. So this is the 5th rendition. That this is the final rendition that will
Oh,
be
thank you.
up on the website.
Mhm.
The legal notice that already says that this will be the official document. So there's no confusion as to who, what, or what we're going to be talking about at the public hearing. All of the
Thank you.
documents are gone.
Commissioners?
So moved.
Second.
All right. Moved by James, seconded by Phil. All in favor, raise their hands.
Aye.
Thank you. Now we're going to move on to public commentary. And I, as usual, have something to say about that too. I want to ask that everybody who has a public comment to make understand that we will not be responding to you or answering for the reasons that I stated earlier. And I want to remind you that every one of us, with the exception of the appointees who are in between elections, were elected by the townspeople to these positions, and that we function completely as volunteers. We are not paid. I insist that we be treated with respect. That said, we are glad to hear your comments. We do take them seriously. We do consider them, as I think you should have learned from hearing how I brought up the written comments that I received earlier today. The one proviso I will state ahead of time is that any person who makes comments that are of the nature of a personal attack will be muted for the duration of the meeting. So now, Jonathan is going to pay attention to people who raise their hands, and we'll ask you to unmute, and we'll be happy to hear what you have to add.
Joanne, I see you're unmuted. Are you ready to go?
Ready? Yes, thank you very much. Very interesting meeting, and having served as chairman of a different zoning board, the Zoning Board of Appeals, I certainly realize how much work and effort you put into it, because I know I did the same when I served in that job. I think what I find very uncomfortable about is this decision that this board has made, as you referred to in your January and March meetings, to entirely rewrite planning and zoning rules. I mean, we just finished writing our 10-year plan in the POCOD, and all of a sudden, this board decides to take on an entirely new something that was not included in the POCOD. It just seems bizarre to me and actually wrong. There's 70 items that, as you've all pointed out, in that POCOD. There's plenty of us, plenty of work to be done. It hardly seems necessary to take on the entire rewrite. But what concerns me is that after you decided to withdraw the first set of proposed regulations, essentially this set of regulations, good, bad, or indifferent, have been written in workshop sessions. And those workshop sessions do not permit any public input. So essentially you're bringing something forward that has had no public input during that time. Making a joke about the funny line in our present regulations about home crafty things. You could have picked a lot of other lines from our present regulations that I think are very appropriate, still very appropriate. But then again, crafty production of home things. Esty is a multi-million-dollar business based on that very concept. So making fun of that, I think, did not do much to take away the value in our present regulations and the need to completely just throw them in the trash can. I think there are things in there that are worth preserving going forward. Speaking of going forward, I think for the first time we have a very clear directive from our zoning enforcement officer about the need for an official website so that she can no longer be worried about that and not feel that it's an odious burden to post things on a non-official website. So we do need a town official website going forward. And I'm sure that one of the things that I noted that you didn't discuss, and I hope you will, was someone else's comments about employees and how employees have a dictionary definition that may be very insufficient for today's world of contractors and other compensation related ways. So limiting your restrictions to employees is probably very insufficient. And finally, since there was no notice that only written comments would be responded to tonight, and since you've done such a great job of responding to the Blaine Matthews input, I hope you will respond in the same way in light of the fairness doctrine that you outlined, Madam Chairman, to respond to the other input you may or may not get tonight from other people. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanne.
Yep.
Anybody else? Any other hands?
So I
Jonathan,
can't view everybody's hand.
I see Caroline.
Okay, go ahead, Caroline.
Thank you for the work of the commission. I've been watching these meetings and have appreciated all the work that's gone into trying to figure out how to make the regulations that are being proposed now work for Cornwall. I think the problem that the commission may be encountering is the fact that, as the previous speaker just said, is that the commission is trying to rewrite the entirety of these regulations, and to do so, for example, with regards to the home business regulations, instead of just fixing that reference, for example, to traditional home enterprises and deleting it, or just doing some tweaks or updates as the plan of conservation and development calls for, that this train running down the track to kind of wipe out the entirety of the home business regulations in favor of this new template, I think is really the wrong approach for Cornwall. People have spent a lot of years and time and working on carefully crafting these regulations. And I think if, as many people have noted on the community network, they're crafted quite well. And they're very specific and they work really well for the community of Cornwall. And to come in and kind of just wipe them out entirely, I don't think is the best approach, not only for time reasons, but just I don't think it works for Cornwall. And there was a mention of these regulations as being really outdated. But in fact, if there is something called the Connecticut Model Guide for Zoning Regulations, it's a best practices document that the University of Connecticut puts together. It contains the best practices from all of the towns in Connecticut. Our regulations as they are now are almost, for the home business, are almost exactly like those model guide best practices regulations. So very, very similar. So they are not outdated. They're actually very current. And to think that by the new regulations, I find so simplified to the point of allowing things in Cornwall that have the potential to very much harm Cornwall. And so if we're going to create new regulations, they have to be better. They can't be worse. And I think what we're seeing here with a lot of the comments from the public is that these regulations are worse. And the commission has been trying so hard to figure out a way to make these regulations work within a template, like trying to put in, a square peg into a circle. And I think the better thing to do would be to take a step back, stop this train running down the tracks and say, let's look at the regulations we have and make them work. I think it would make make them work by tweaks, by updates, by small improvements. I think the commission would have a much easier time of really making sure that these regulations satisfy the community and also, protect the rural character, the residential nature, while also, of course, doing what Gordon has mentioned, which is improving, welcoming home business, which is what we have done in Cornwall with the regulations we have now for years and years and years. So that's what I would just like to say to the commission, that this really be reconsidered, this overall template. My last question is to ask Janelle if she could, the consultant for the COG, if she could tell us what, or Anna, you could tell, well, she's not a member of the commission, so she could actually respond. She doesn't vote on this issue. And the question to Janelle is what template she's using, because I think that's really important. We know that the zoning regulations, the model guide of Connecticut, we know that our current regulations comport well with that guide. What template is Janelle using for these regulations? Because that's important. We have to know where these regulations are coming from and what towns are using these regulations. So if she could ask that, I would very much, if she could answer that, I would very much appreciate it. Thank you.
Have anything to say, Janelle?
Sure. So in preparing for writing the home business section of the regulations, my first task was to compile an Excel spreadsheet of all the other home business regulations within the region. So that includes similar towns. So I looked at where there are similar hierarchies. I don't have that spreadsheet in front of me, but the towns that call to mind, I believe, are Kent, are Litchfield, and that's where the hierarchy is also mentioned. The COG came out with a briefing prior to my time serving with them as the regional planner on home business best practices in Connecticut. I do believe that came out, it might have been 2016, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
Suggesting this hierarchy and working within that, thinking through best practices in Connecticut. Another thought behind updating the regulations was definitely bringing in the concept of home office, because as mentioned in the beginning of the presentation, items that aren't in the regulations currently are not recognized as permissible uses. So that was a big important step in rewriting the regulations, was to keep in mind that there is a concept of a home office and that many of us are working from home these days. So my research entailed looking at nearby towns, seeing what they were doing, looking at hierarchies. I Emailed with several zoning officers in the region. Salisbury really walked me through what it was they were doing, and then referenced other towns in the state, and then also worked within the template of the Northwest Hills COG when they came up with the home business-based regulations. And just based on my own experience as a zoning enforcement officer and what can indeed be enforced in the field and what is tricky to enforce in the field as a zoning officer as well. So my experience along with my research.
Caroline, I'm going to ask you to stop now because other people need to turn. We've had a long meeting.
I
Thank
was
you.
just gonna ask. if
Thank
she
you
could
for your comments.
She could provide those regulations, that's all.
She's under no obligation to do so, I want to say. Is there anybody else who has a comment to make?
Madam Chair, just to add, so all of the town's regulations in the nearby region, those are available online. So those are really good resources to look at when thinking through my starting place.
Right. Good point. All right, well, there's something like 40 of you who have listened this evening. I can't believe you sat through this whole thing. You must have something you would like us to hear about, or you wouldn't have bothered. So perhaps we were able to answer whatever questions you might have had during the meeting. I guess I have to assume that everybody will have another chance when we actually have the public hearing, and at that time, all public comment will be a matter of legal testimony, and an audio file will be kept. At that time, we will be asking you to please give your name before you speak because you will be recorded. The commission members are obligated to take all the evidence that they've collected and all the information and all the various aspects and angles about the home business regulations into account before they arrive at a decision. But I want to emphasize that in the end, the commissioner's first duty is to do the best they can for the town. And when we make our decision, it will be on that basis. Can I ask for a motion to close the meeting?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. This meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Thank you.
See ya.
Thanks.